of life, the earth is full of your creatures, and by your wisdom you made them all. Plants yielding seeds, trees bearing fruit, water creatures, birds, animals, creepy crawlies. And our churchyards sustain diverse communities, and through the changing season, your spirit renews cycles of life. So this evening, with Jan guiding us, please open our eyes to see the precious diversity in our churchyards and all around. Enlighten our minds to appreciate the delicate balance maintained by each creature, and inspire us to conserve the precious habitats that nurture this web of life. In the name of the one who came to proclaim good news to all creation, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
So it really gives me great pleasure to introduce Jan Nobel, who I met in October in Scarborough at an eco-church conference. Jan's a parish priest in York, as well as Green Ambassador for the Diocese of York. And he holds theology degrees from Leuven, Utrecht and Durham, and teaches the Doctrine of Creation at the Yorkshire Theological Education Partnership. And Jan, you spoke about the abundance of wildlife in churchyards, why we can enjoy it and why we should enjoy it. And you really encouraged me with initiatives to help us and our communities connect and engage with that wildlife. So I think when I came home in October, I went down and used my plant identification app on my churchyard. And even then, when there weren't so many flowers, I identified the common ones like hawthorn, sycamore, ash, cow parsnip, also buckthorn, hemp agrimony, knapweed, wild marjoram, field scabious. I could go on. So what is it, Jan, that drew you to encourage us all to enjoy the biodiversity in our churchyards? Over to you to tell us more.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for that introduction. Yeah, what drew me? I mean, it will be revealed during the talk, but one particular aspect of this is that my next door parish is the University of York, and one of the people working there is Professor Colin Beale, who is now chair of trustees at Yorkshire, and he works in particular in the field of biodiversity. So I've often talked to him about it, and he has inspired me in various ways. And some of the information that I'll share with you tonight will be stolen directly from him. But why not? So let me share the screen with you and introduce this presentation called Why Look for the Living Among the Dead? Some of you will recognize that phrase. It is indeed from the Bible. It is, if you remember what the angel said to the women who visited the grave of the resurrected Jesus. What are you doing here? Why look for the living among the dead? But I thought it might also be an interesting title for thinking about the churchyard and what are we looking for in the churchyard? Is it just a place for burying our dead, or is it a place of life and resurrection? And it certainly can be if we make room for nature in God's acre. So that is the title of the presentation tonight. And let's not talk tonight about all the environmental costs of AI, but I must confess that I used AI to create the image that you'll see on your screen. I asked AI to show me a churchyard with wildflowers, and this is what it came up with. And not bad. I'm a bit worried that there's no door into the church, but you can worship God outside as well. And as you can see, it's very cleverly sort of composed of nicely shortcut paths, but also areas where wildflowers can grow. And this whole picture speaks to me about life rather than death. So not bad. And that's what we'll be thinking about tonight. Now, usually when I do this presentation, I've got a bit more time for it. And also some of the people who attend the presentation might not be as familiar with the themes that we're talking about as most of you will be. So I try and introduce the climate crisis, not just as something that requires us to reduce our carbon emissions and the whole net zero effort, because at times that it becomes very unpopular with people, and particularly when I've talked to small churches, churches in the countryside that are hardly got enough money to turn the heating on, let alone to replace their heating system to make it low carbon. I always talk to them about the fact that, you know, the climate crisis has got two sides to it. We have to address the causes of it, but we also can address the general health and and the resilience of the world around us, of creation, and in that sense contribute to the prevention of the decline in nature and the crisis that we see enveloping around us, rather than treating it. And preventing it might be much cheaper. And each little church, even in the smallest churches in the countryside, can very easily help with it. Often they are ideally placed to help with it and building the health of the planet through biodiversity. I then explain about biodiversity and its role, its key role in food production and the economy, medicine and health, recovery from natural disasters, much quicker if there's a healthy ecosystem, moderation of weather and climate. You can hear more about that and read more about it in all kinds of places. But I'll move over that because I think this won't be any news to you tonight. And I'd like to move on and spend a bit more time on the practical aspects of looking after your churchyards. I talk about the Anthropocene extinction, about the mass extinction that we are experiencing among the species that surround us, and how that endangers our livelihoods, really. How it is so much higher than it should be, this extinction rate. And then I often quote John Hildrop, an English theologian from the 18th century, who said, "What God has reason to create, God has reason to preserve, since any reason for its annihilation or extinction would also be a reason that they should not have been created." I find that a very interesting statement, and you might discuss about his theory of creation, if it is quite what we think happened at the beginning of life. But I think it's a very important notion that if God wants things to be there and to live and to flourish, then it is not down to us to stop that from happening and to bring about extinctions, because that should, you know, logically go directly against God's plan and therefore should be avoided. And then any church, of course, is encouraged, first of all, to join the Eco Church program, which you will all be familiar with. And this area of thinking about the churchyard falls under the heading of land. But rather than jumping to the questionnaire and the practical implications of what you could do in your churchyard, hanging up bird boxes, that kind of thing, I always think that it is important to address sort of the big questions behind how we live on the land and deal with the land that we are responsible for as churches, our stewardship, if you wish. We are the custodians of a little bit of nature around our church building. And the question there is, who is it for, and who owns it really? Often people immediately would jump to the conclusion and saying, well, it's owned by the PCC. And who is it for? Well, it's for people who died and burials. And it's for people who come there to mourn. Actually, we should perhaps challenge that perspective and say, hang on a second, this is not in our ownership in that way. It is in God's ownership ultimately. And just like we say at the point when we collect the gifts that of the people of God, we say, "Of your own do we give you." It's the same way when we deal with the churchyard. We are dealing with a bit of God's earth and God's acre, and it's not just for us and not just our home. Now, I've set you a discussion question later, so you can respond to that statement and think it through together when we come to the breakout groups. Why are churchyards so important for biodiversity, though? And this is where Professor Colin Beale has greatly helped me understand this. Um, First of all, when you add up all of the little churchyards that seem quite small and insignificant, if you add them up together, you come to 14,000 hectares of land managed in churchyards. And that together is the equivalent of a small national park. And in fact, it is really important that that land is spread out across the nation quite thinly, because that creates a network for nature. And nature can't survive just all put together in one corner of the country. It needs to have corridors to go from one national park to the other national park, or from one small reserve to the other small reserve, from one river to the other river. And so our churchyards are absolutely key in this network. And what's really interesting is that many of these churchyards contain a habitat which is extremely rare in the UK, wildflower meadows. And Professor Colin Beale tells me that since the 1930s, 97% of UK wildflower meadows have been lost. It used to be a very common habitat in the UK, and you would see wildflowers everywhere. But with the intensification of farming, with the introduction of pesticides and of enrichment, as they call it, through extra nutrients, and a lot of that original habitat has been destroyed. However, churchyards are the exception. Often you find these little pockets of old wildflower meadow that may have been mown almost to death, like a golf course, for year upon year, decade upon decade. But if you would step back and let it grow, it would show that under the ground, in the soil, there is still the remnants of that wildflower meadow habitat, and it would grow back. This is really important because we call this unimproved land. And that's really rich in certain species of grasses and of flowers, and therefore a really important habitat for insects and for invertebrates, even for wildlife. In an otherwise often urban or very managed agricultural landscape of incredible importance. Now, these are just some organizations that I introduce to people. Usually, they won't be new to you, Eco Church, but Caring for God's Acre is the charity that stands out here, and I assume all of you have heard about it. But it is a charity that punches well above its weight by just looking at the value of churchyards and how we can look after them better, what we can do together. In some parts of the country, the Wildlife Trust also works alongside churches, often focusing on churchyards, but not every Wildlife Trust does that. However, if you go onto their website, you can still find good ideas. And then, of course, the Church of England has its own environment program, which is very helpful advice for how to manage your churchyard better. So that's where I direct people to start the journey if they want to improve things. But there's one particular initiative where some of these different charities come together once a year. It's a joint initiative between Caring for God's Acre, the charity that really works only with churchyards, Arusha, which has this wider focus, but that land included in it, and then the Church of England, a much wider focus, but again, they advertise the Love Your Burial Ground Week. And some comments from previous years when churches have joined that, the children got really excited about what to find. People were just surprised by the diversity that they found on such a small spot of land. They didn't realize it was there. And when they started recording the biodiversity and the different species, they also started to understand the relationships between them. As in, some species would be living on certain plants, other species would be relying on the actual church yard stones, for instance, the lichen that grow on the stones, things like that. And there's a whole network and a web of life happening in the churchyards, which people might not be aware of. I've got a little advert for that Love Your Burial Ground Week, which every year happens in the second week of June, just to give you an idea of what that's like.
There are 20,000 burial grounds in England and Wales, ranging from small medieval churchyards to large Victorian cemeteries, spanning different cultures, religions and centuries. These unique sites appeal to many who are interested in their local history and the natural world. We started a dedicated week, Love Your Burial Ground Week, to help highlight and celebrate these amazing sites which are often right on people's doorsteps. It takes place in the second week of June, taking in 2 weekends so as to give you lots of time to run some great events. As you can see, lots of people have turned up, many who haven't visited the cemetery before. Mammal trapping hasn't been quite as successful as the moth trapping, as slugs have set the traps off, but we have found 2 field mice, learnt how important this cemetery is for local wildlife, and had good fun. Events in previous years have included teddy bear picnics, family bug hunts, dawn chorus, illustrated talks, wildflower identification, memorial recording and volunteer work parties, to name a few. Think about who you'd like to come to your event. Are you aiming it at family groups and children? If so, you will find many activity ideas in our online education pack that's free to download from our website. If you are planning to run an event in Love Your Burial Ground Week, please register it with Caring for God's Acre. There is a simple form on our website. This helps us to get national publicity for the whole concept of the week, and it's really interesting to see what different groups are running all over the country. We hope you will join us this year to celebrate your unique burial ground.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful, lovely initiative indeed. And it's very easy to take part in this Love Your Burial Ground Week. And that's what I'll focus a little bit more on in this talk now, about how you would take part in it. It's only January now. You've got plenty of time to plan this for your local church, because as I said, it is in June. But what you do, and I think the registration are probably already open for this year or will be opening soon, you go onto the website for Churches Count on Nature and you register your churchyard as one of the places where you're going to join this project in whatever way. You could make it a really big event, inviting all kinds of people from the community to join you, or you could just walk around with the church warden and record, with 1 or 2 or 3 people the species that you see. It still all helps, as I'll show you in a moment. I'm interested that, recently I showed a group of school children around the church. A lot of them have come sometimes into churches, but have not really looked around a churchyard. In fact, one of the children was asking me, why is the churchyard so creepy? And I said, what is creepy about the churchyard? And in the end, we came to the conclusion that, of course, a lot of children have seen gravestones only in sort of a context of horror. But actually, it's a place of nature and discovery and life. And it's really interesting to take children outside and show them that. You download an app to join this project. There is the iNaturalist app. It might not be the best app for recording things, but it is the app that works with this project, and therefore, if everybody uses the same app, it gets all the data to the same place. That's why it's important that you use this app. So what it is you download it on a smartphone, and you register an account in the app, which is very easy. You just give them your email address and a password. You know all how that works. And then you join the project through the app. There's a selection of projects that you can choose from, and you become part of this project. And then next, you start to identify things with your app. And what that means is that you walk outside in your churchyard, you point your camera at whatever species you see, and you ask the app what it is. And it will come up with a suggestion, and it will say how likely it is that the suggestion is correct. And then you can log that as one of your sightings, if you're fairly confident that, the app might be right. Otherwise, you might perhaps take a picture from a different angle or add some more information to it, so that in the end, the likelihood of the correct identification goes up. But it doesn't really matter that much. It's basically accessible for anyone of any level of knowledge. That's what the point is. You don't have to be some kind of flower expert to be able to use this app. You then share and upload your sightings again through the app. You only have to say like these sightings fall into the category of this beautiful burial grounds app project. The app already registers where you are by GPS, so your location is already part of the sighting. And then, like I said, you select beautiful burial grounds and you submit each record that you do. And what you end up with, if you then come home later, or even the next year, or even in the middle of winter, and you think of the project, you can log into the website of iNaturalist and see all the different sightings that have been recorded around your churchyard. So, I mean, the GPS is not always so precise, so some of the sightings seem to be on the other side of the road, but it doesn't matter. It clearly, if you select sort of a little area around your church, it clearly shows you all the sightings of that locality. And it will tell you when these sightings were done. So you could select, for instance, all the sightings from 2023 or 2024 or 2025. You see the progress that you're making, if you're increasing biodiversity, if you're starting like a compost heap, surely that will attract different species. If there's a change going on in terms of the bird life, it's all very visible and very helpful information and interesting, fascinating information for yourself as well. It also adds all the different sightings of other people. So as you can see in this list here, which is around St. Thomas Church, it's just down the road. It's the church where I work. There's some that I have entered, but other people have entered sightings as well. I might not even know who they are, but you know, that's how it works. And then you build up a whole picture of the biodiversity in your churchyard without being an expert. Now, there will, of course, be some value in letting the grass grow longer and that kind of thing, and that will always disturb some people. So I always advise people to start with helping people to see things in a different perspective and say, you know, this is not just for the church and for people who are bereaved and for the dead. This is also the home for the sparrow and the swallow close to the altars of our God. And then when we start creating more room for wildlife in that place, more species will make it their home. So you add a bug hotel, a bird box, a hedgehog house, all of that, and you should see differences when you go round every year in June to record the wildlife. And then it's very important that you make a little map with a management plan so that everybody knows what's going on, especially in relation to grass cutting. So that if you're trying to grow a nice wildflower area, it doesn't accidentally get cut, as it still happens. It's very easy to do that. You go on Google Maps, you take a little screenshot of your area, and then you paste that into a document, like just a Word document, and you bring down the contrast. That's how it becomes sort of like this fuzzy color to the left. And then you can just start adding all kinds of bits of information that you want to add. So for instance, here in the corner of our churchyard, we grow spring flowers. There's lots of daffodil bulbs there. We need to be aware of that. We don't need to cut that too early in the year. Over here, there's a wood pile. The evergreen trees here are yew trees, and there's some big yew trees here as well, but there's more dioecious trees close to the back here. We hung a bird box in this tree. It's been used straight away every year by the not by the long-tailed tits, by the blue tits. We make note of the hedges that are there, because hedges are very significant, of course. In fact, I was talking to a neighboring parish where they are extending the churchyard, and it's now part of law that if you're doing some development, and extending a churchyard is supposed to be a development, you also have to offer something back to biodiversity. So they are very consciously choosing to plant certain hedges around the new area of the churchyard as an improvement of biodiversity. And then, of course, you want to let a few areas of grass grow long to see which wildflowers appear. Now, we did that on the south side of the church because we expected there was a lot of sunshine there, that lots of wildflowers would come up, and they didn't for some reason. I don't know why. So now we're actually having an area to the west of the church and to the north of the church, and lots of wildflowers are coming up there, thankfully. But this is how easy it is to just make a little maintenance plan and then ask the grass cutters, whoever is responsible for that, to avoid those areas. You might want to put some little flags in the ground to mark the area in spring and say, can you please only cut that sort of in mid-August, depending on what kind of meadow you're looking for, if it's a summer meadow or a spring meadow. And again, it's an experiment, see what comes up. If you want more advice on, how do I know when to cut the grass, God's Acre, the charity, will give you all that information on their website. So you make a map with a management plan, and then you create some signage and interpretation, because some people are not coming to your church and they don't know anything that you are an eco church, and they will start complaining. Thankfully, Caring for God's Acre has got these lovely signs which are renewed every year, which very clearly say the grass will get cut at some point. This area is being managed as a meadow. It will be cut and raked in the summer of 2025. And of course, there will be a new poster next year. These are downloadable for free. They're attractive. You just laminate them and put them around the long growing grass and everybody's happy. In my case, that's as easy as it is to avoid the complaints. It depends, of course. You might have to do a bit more work with the people in your local community, depending on how open they are to that kind of thing. But you then do invite the community to come to your churchyard, because it's no good having it sit there with nobody visiting it. You want to involve the community and help them to experience this as a peaceful place where they can find life, even resurrection life, and contemplation in this place in the middle of your community. I think that is my 25 minutes up, and that seems to be all right, because we are now, if I stop by share, ready to go into some groups, I think.
Yes, thank you. Thank you ever so much, Jan. There's so much food for thought there. And I certainly think that in Green Christian we'll want to be following this through, perhaps in a coordinated way, so that we can encourage each other on. There
Sure.
is an immediate question, just a technical
Okay.
thing, which is that survey in June is called Love Your Burial Ground. And a lot of us
Yeah.
are in churches that don't have a burial ground. So just
Ah,
they might have a garden, or not even a garden, just a small
yeah,
space. Can we
yeah.
still take part in it, even though
Of
strictly
course.
speaking, yes?
Yes, the answer is yes. Yes,
Mm.
indeed. It's just a title, but
Yes, of
they might
course.
want to think about changing the title
Yes,
ever so slightly. And I
yeah.
think nowadays in the Eco Church survey, there's sort of two pathways,
Mm.
depending on if you've
Indeed,
got a
yeah.
burial ground or if you
Yes, you're
haven't got a burial
absolutely
ground.
right. But this is obviously the different organisations, not just Eco Church.
Yes,
Um,
yes, that's
yeah,
right.
and I do wonder how many people who are nature lovers who have kept an area that is not cut, the grass is not cut, haven't communicated that to the normal grass cutters. I think I've heard of it happen a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
happens a lot. It's
Um,
sad.
Thank you that
We
you.
are, I think, fortunate with the landscaping company that works in our churchyard. They fully understand it, and I think more and more gardening companies are now uh, aware of this. I
Yes.
mean, it's almost like you would expect it if you go to a National Trust property or
Mm,
places like
mm.
that, that the way that the gardens are managed is good for wildlife, and there will be wild areas. Yeah.
Indeed, which is good. So thank you, Jan, for setting or suggesting some questions in advance. And David's going to put those into the chat for when we go into breakout groups. And the first is, as Jan was saying, who owns the churchyard? Who is it for? And the second question, which people or groups in the community, but I would say specifically which people or groups in your community,
Yes.
because we all differ, might be interested in recording biodiversity in the churchyard. So I wondered if we could just look at the first question, and if there are any questions coming out of that. Who is the churchyard for?
Mm.
Do feel free to raise a hand on your screen or using the raising hand function.
In our group, and when I've done this talk before, that question has always come up. There's a very mixed experience of who is responsible for the upkeep of the churchyard. Sometimes you've got this thing called a closed churchyard, and then the council is responsible for the maintenance. But there's a million different ways in which the council could do that. So sometimes the council just goes for the cheapest option and doesn't want to take any exceptions. But sometimes, as in my case, in Oswaldwick in York, the council employs a gardening company, and the gardening company asks us what needs doing. So we have got much more control.
So we had exactly that scenario in our group, that one person has a closed churchyard and the council is responsible and they contract. But I don't think we had quite the same approach, that they would come and ask the church wardens. So there was a bit of tension, and we had other examples of where there was tension between different groups who use the churchyard and feel it's their churchyard.
Really,
and we had quite a discussion around how best to hold that tension, and we certainly agreed that putting up notices and explaining and inviting people to friends of groups and user group meetings and lots of information giving was important. Anything come up for other groups on that one? Or from my group, I haven't really said it all. If you'd like to pitch in, please do. Yes, Colin, hello. Please unmute yourself and...
Yes, hello everybody. Nice to see everybody again. Happy New Year and all that. We had the thought that the churchyard was for the... It comes back to the title of your talk, Jan. The churchyard is for the living, including the non-human living, the animals as well. Well, in one instance, we had somebody with dog walkers coming. We get a bit of that, but I'm in a different situation because we have a public right of way across the church property, which isn't really the yard. Well, it's a yard which is paved. It's not where the tombs are, such as they are. The other thought that I would just throw in is that, of course, it depends in terms of the connection of the community to any actual burials there may or may not still be live in the generational sense. So far as I'm aware, my church has relatively few graves in the actual churchyard because there's a public cemetery that was opened later, not very far away. And that's where everybody is who's the current generation of people from the community or people who've moved away. So the graves themselves are the graves of people from the mid and late 19th century, and the descendants have disappeared now and nobody puts flowers or anything in that particular place. So it's a little bit different to perhaps a larger one where it's still even got vacant plots.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't actually advocate for letting it completely be grown over and letting it as wild as it gets. There's a lot of sensibilities around just making safe access for people, because if it's too wild, nobody can actually access the wildlife either. And of course, graves that are of certain historic heritage importance may get certain visitors. We have got various graves in our churchyard where people just come as a sort of a pilgrimage to see those graves. We'll make sure that those areas are tidy. And some species actually flourish in those shortcut areas. Certain species of mushrooms, for instance, grow much happier when the grass is cut low than when it is growing long. So there's absolutely room for balance. Yeah, and then what you're saying about, the other thing was other species, other non-human species. Sometimes it's interesting to think about this as we treat other species as if they are objects, and we should treat them as subjects. And sometimes I do an exercise with people where you go outside and find another species. It could be just a tree, or it could be a bee or whatever, and just imagine that creature has a personality, has rights, has a relationship with God, has a home to go back to, all of that, has needs to feed. It's much more than an object that we study and label and walk away from.
And that
Um,
helps. That helps the
that
connections, doesn't
really
it?
helps to connect. Yeah.
Thank you. Could we go to Barbara, please?
Yes, just to bring in the complications sometimes of
Mm.
who is doing what and who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
My churchyard is a 1200-year-old foundation, so the churchyard is very old, and it has been a closed churchyard for 150 years for burials, but we still have cremations.
Oh, yes.
And therefore, the local authority is indeed responsible for the churchyard, which is both a
Yep.
blessing and a curse, because you have to communicate,
Yeah.
and they do the grass cutting.
Yeah.
And so this is great. It is complicated. I
Yeah.
would say no more than that. But nevertheless, I think my main thing I want to say is that when there's so many people with different ideas of what they would like the churchyard to be like, you get along best if you compromise and you try to do things that so everybody ends up reasonably happy. And we've got it's an open pathway. I mean, several pathways, footpaths going through, with lots of people coming in just there. And so we've got part of the churchyard that is a wildflower meadow, and because it's old pasture, all we've added to it was yellow rattle in one part to control some of the grass, and it's amazing what's come up. Cowslips are flowers, orchids are coming, lots of different wildflowers. Other parts of the churchyard, we have rose borders, which our churchyard gardening group keep it nice and neat and weeded, and so people then appreciate the fact they kind of, those that really didn't want the long grass left are happy to have it because they appreciate what we're doing to keep the other bit looking lovely. So it's kind of trying to find ways to work along with people and being very patient. We're trying to get the grass cutting regime with the actual people who do it at about four removes from who you're communicating with.
Yeah. It's really tricky, but the communication is key. And sometimes I find that you should be reluctant of people who say, like, we've tried this before and everybody complains. So sometimes the PCC are saying, like, we did this 10 years ago and nobody liked it. Well, times do change, you see, and we're evidence of that tonight, I think. That before COVID we wouldn't have met in this kind of way, would we? We've all learned to use Zoom, and we've all discovered nature on our doorsteps, and we've all got a much more openness to some of these things. So,
and that's very true.
Yeah,
and one little compromise thing that we have found really helpful is to have a mown strip between the footpaths and the wild area.
Yes.
And little things like that. Everybody, I would say, the vast majority of people now are totally with us.
Yeah.
It's worked. And so it's compromise and communication.
Yeah.
Those little compromises really help with increasing the blessings and reducing the curses. And could we go to Catherine Page?
Yes. Our church is linked to the local junior school, and it is very keen on eco things. They actually have a very small allotment, and they've got an outdoor classroom with things, but they do come across to the church every summer and tour our garden, and we talk to them about who is there. So our church is also for young people, not just animals and birds and things. It's also for children as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for the living.
That's lovely to know. And do you think that perhaps brings us to this second question?
Absolutely, yes.
Which groups do you think would take part and would be keen to take part in those surveys?
Maybe the children would.
We mentioned young people, and we said that often they then enthuse other perhaps their family members, their parents, and other members of the community as well.
Absolutely. It's very easy to attract young people and young families with activities like this. And I think as churches there's a massive, what we call a mission opportunity, to connect with that generation through your churchyards. They might not come to the Sunday morning next week, but if you build up that relationship one day,
It is missional, isn't it? Yes. We've got two hands gone up. Can I come to you, Judith? Judith Allenson. Thank you.
Unmute. Thank you very much for such a comprehensive talk. It's great. You covered a lot of points. So I'm Judith, and I live in Settle in North Yorkshire. I'm also a member of the British Lichen Society. And
Hooray!
we're having our annual general meeting in Carlisle this year again.
Yeah.
And so people come from all over the Lichen Society, and each year there's this sort of day conference, and this year it's actually on churchyards and managed land. About 30 years ago, there was a big sort of subgroup in the Lichen Society that did churchyards, and lots of records on the distribution map for Britain is what's been recorded in churchyards. We're enthusiastic because there's such a variety of habitats and different types of gravestones give us records. But if you're interested in getting a lichen survey done, you could always contact the Lichen Society and see if there was somebody near you. There's very few really good experts, but there's an increasing number of people who are learners, and they could give you some records, even if they couldn't give them all. That's number one point. Number two is to ask your own Natural History Society if somebody would come, because you don't know, you might strike lucky, you might not, but that would be a good way of contacting somebody in the community.
Yes.
And I've been involved with a churchyard in I'm sure he had a picture from Shero when those two kids on the lawn were looking at the bug house, and I attended that just as a participant, but I saw a ruby-tailed wasp. I'm not an entomologist, but I was very impressed to be shown. They've got a lovely churchyard. It's MC Churchyards. They Gold Eco Church, and they arrange something every year. They're lucky because the primary school next door that sends 2 classes every year and do a metal frame and do quadrats. But also because they organise quite a few things, it's a meeting point for other churches. So quite often we get 2 or 3 enthusiasts coming from other churches who meet and share ideas.
I totally agree, and I think a lot of these smaller sort of organizations and associations are really keen to do things with their specialized topics. So, for instance, if you've got a bird watching club like the York Ornithological Union or something like that, you only have to send them an email and they will find someone to come and look at birds in your churchyard and tell you exactly what lives there. So there's a lot of opportunity to just work with other organizations, and exactly what you're saying there, Judith, is why I asked that question. Just to explain to people, there's so much opportunity of working together.
People really like to share their expertise, don't they?
That's it. Yes.
And you might strike lucky and you might not, but it's really worth trying quite a few.
And on lichens, whether or not you have a survey would be great, but even without one, maybe a little notice saying we love our lichens, because we had a comment in our group about some local history society carefully removing all the lichens from the gravestones. So we need that communication. Can I go to Isabella and then Nicola, and then I think we need to think about closing in prayer. So Isabella.
Just a very quick comment. The advisability of having small amounts of small pots of water in your around, is that a good idea? I mean, I do that in my garden, but might that be something to do?
That is a very good idea. I remember when it was so hot in the summer. Was it this summer when it was so dry? And I put just a bowl of water in our garden and put a wildlife camera next to it to record during the night. And I was really surprised. There were hedgehogs coming to drink from it. There were also the local cats came to drink from it. There's all different species and birds, of course, that used it straight away. So even huge. It's massively important.
Yes, thank you. And Nicola.
Yes, I was just saying in our group, I'm in rugby, and that's our little green Christian group. That's our sort of project for this year, is to try and link up green spaces, and they haven't all got burial sites, but around churches. So that's one thing. But also we're fortunate we've got an eco hub in its first year here, so we're very much linking already with other groups. I think that's sort of vital. Who also are concerned about the climate crisis and biodiversity. loss. So I think that's and camera. Yes, one Catholic church, somebody's put a camera up, and they were very surprised about the amount of wildlife coming through. So cameras, that was the other thing. Thank you.
Wonderful. So lots of connections, and as Julia's put in the chat, lots of outreach opportunity there. So that's wonderful. Oh, there's so much that we can follow up on and continue discussing and follow through with, Jan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm just, before we finally wind up, I'm going to ask you to lead us in a final prayer, please, Jan.
Well, yes, I did prepare some prayers for tonight. You'll find that I'm a vicar at heart, and I've created a tiny little liturgy. So there's an opening prayer, then there's a reflective piece of music for us just to watch and listen to and have a moment of spiritual reflection. I just saw someone putting it in the chat that they've got a group who does that in the churchyard. Well, we're doing it behind our computers tonight. And then there's a final blessing. So I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm going to do it optimized for videos sharing. And if anyone wants to join with the words printed in bold, then you are most welcome to do so, or just sit back and listen. So let us gather ourselves wherever we are around the country or around the world even, into the presence of our God and Creator, who is everywhere, closer than anything. God the Maker, maker of color, sound, texture, quietness, and a restless beauty in living things. We bless you.
Bless you.
God the Maker, we, the children of your love, the creatures of your kindness, the guardians of your creation, bless you. We bless you for your making, your trusting, your loving, your never-ending goodness. Amen.
Amen.
Bless to us, O God, the moon that is above us, the earth that is beneath us, the friends that are around us, your image deep within us, the rest which is before us. Amen.
Amen. Wow. With those prayers, that conclusion and the song, it was a reminder, Jan, that we do rest in those everlasting arms when we're particularly close to nature and at other times, but that we also want to preserve that nature for itself, for us, but for those who perhaps at the moment aren't able to connect with it, perhaps they're just not able to reach it for whatever reason. And we think of those as well. What an inspiration this evening. Such an inspiring time, and we're really grateful. And we know that we can share contact details about God's Acre, about Count on Nature and Love Your Burial Ground.